Okay, thanks everybody for being online, and I just want to introduce the session by introducing myself and then the panel. I'm John Hart. I'm Chair of Tourism Training Australia, and in that capacity, I'm here with you today to speak to my two colleagues about where we're at right now in the hospitality space. Obviously, it's an interesting time to have this discussion. It gets more interesting by the day. But two people that are really connected to where the industry is at right now are my two guests. The first guest, Steve Sid, a great operator in the catering space, and we'll hear in a minute from Steve about what his experience is during what is now a lockdown in Sydney and seemingly maybe in other places around the country shortly. But Steve's doing an outstanding job with his businesses during this very difficult time. My other guest, Jenny White, from White Now, runs a staffing agency and is particularly working in the club space. Jenny does an outstanding job of servicing that sector and really has her finger on the pulse in terms of where the labour market's up to, how we're doing, skilling people up for the jobs that we have available, and also the movements of the labour market as we go in and out of lockdowns and all sorts of other things. So we'll get to the discussion with my fellow panellists very shortly. Firstly, can I just, I want to go through a few areas that we're really spending a lot of time on right at the minute. So I have two predominant hats, one being in the tourism training space, but the thing that occupies most of my time is Executive Chair of Australian Chamber Tourism, which is the peak body in the tourism and hospitality space. We've basically been working over the last couple of weeks on continuing to get support for the industry where we need it. And obviously we've had a support package announced both by the New South Wales government and the federal government. We're not just, though, chasing immediate support, we're chasing longer term support for the sectors that need it. And only a couple of weeks ago, just before the lockdowns commenced, had a discussion with our tourism minister on a range of those areas where we have businesses that are really focused on the international market and can't do any business at all while the border's shut. So we're still working very hard to make sure that that level of support is here, and also, of course, that short-term support. Also doing a lot of work in the reopening space, and that's not just reopening the international border, although we are very focused on reopening the international border, but making sure that we get some of the domestic activity up and running again. Obviously, when we're in lockdown, we're all thinking about when we're going to come out of this circuit breaker, although this is a bit more than a circuit breaker, I think. But we need to know that when we come out of this and the health emergency passes, that we move back to operations as quickly as we possibly can and don't have this sort of long tail of restrictions being released over a great period of time. Also on the reopening process, the priorities that we have at the moment are firstly in reopening domestic cruise, making sure that we can get that market back, but then also opening the international border, doing a lot of work with Singapore, countries like Vanuatu that we believe we can bring into the bubble to get more travel happening to and fro. The interesting part about that is that Vanuatu is also a very good source of labour for Australia, and they're very keen to get back to work in our country. A couple of other priorities that we have on the tourism training front, and I should say that tourism training is basically now in a position to be able to spearhead a lot of these initiatives to get our workforce back up and running. And I'd urge you to come to our website, make sure you have a look at all the material we've got on board, including the summit, the training awards, and of course we need you all to join up as members of tourism training. The support options that we've got running at the moment, we're looking to get support for a labour market solution, and that is really a labour mobility solution to get people moving around the country much more efficiently than they are at the moment. We're working on a skills wallet, which basically allows tracking of COVID-safe training, RSA training, food handling training, which I think will be a feature as we come out of this lockdown, but also a passport for all of the other skill sets that people might have, and also the more informal skill sets or micro-credentials that people are achieving whilst they're undertaking training in lockdown periods, and also when we return to full operations. So a range of things there happening within the tourism training space. I urge you to go onto the website and have a look at those initiatives. And again, make sure you join up while you're there. Okay, so with all of that going on, I thought it would be a really good idea to get together with our panelists today to have a bit of a think about where we're at currently, what's the impact in the short term of the lockdowns, but also to think a bit more long term. We know as we were heading into these lockdown periods that our workforce was probably more stretched than it's ever been. And I just want to canvass some of those issues with our panelists as we go along this afternoon. So firstly, I want to start with Steve. Steve, tell us what does it look like right now? What does lockdown look like? How does it feel, and how are you dealing with this terrible situation we find ourselves in?
Where do I start? Look, my group, which is called Catering HQ, we run 9 clubs throughout Sydney and Greater Sydney. We employ 320 staff, did employ 320 staff. Pre-COVID or pre-lockdown, we were even short 120 staff because business was really booming, and obviously COVID hit and shut us down for 2 weeks. And we thought, okay, 2 weeks, we can handle 2 weeks. We can satisfy ourselves and keep our, retain our staff, 320 staff over 2 weeks. And then obviously things were looking grim, and we obviously had to stand a lot of our staff down. During this whole process with our staff, it's been very important to us to keep that engagement with our staff. So we kept on communicating with them through our group chats, giving them a lot of, making sure we kept that morale up and kept them motivated and say, we still got a job, we're not going anywhere, this will be over, we'll reopen. But even during the time of us being shut down, we're still working on our business model, and we are keep on concentrating on what it's going to look like when we actually come out of COVID, or out of the lockdown, I should say. COVID's going to be with us for quite some time. So we're still working as a business model on how we're going to improve our efficiencies through staff training, through staff engagement, innovative with our menus, and just keep that business still operating, although we're completely shut down, and none of our businesses are currently open at the moment. When we do come out of lockdown, we do have concerns about how long staff can stay without being paid. And we experienced this last time with the last lockdown, where a lot of our great staff, our great chefs, and a lot of our casual staff, they went and worked for jobs like your Coles, like your Bunnings, like your Woolworths, because with lockdown, without lockdown, they're still in operation and they're still booming. So staff wanted to be able to find a secure job that would see them through those processes. So we don't know what it's going to look like for us, and how many staff will still be there for us, and what that shortfall is going to look like. It is unknown, but we are really focusing on, as a business, how we can continue to be an employer of choice. So when we do come through this, out of this lockdown, that people choose Catering HQ over any other businesses. So that's our main focus currently during lockdown.
So Steve, what did the change look like at the end of the big lockdown last year? What sort of proportion of people that were working for you went off and did other things and didn't come back? And how, when people came back on, what was their frame of mind? Were they sort of over it, wanting to change up their lives? Where were they at?
The whole attitude changed. I mean, we probably lost, I would say, about 40% of our staff numbers. So when we did reopen, 40% for us is quite a large number. So when we did reopen, we were short. Although, we didn't bounce back straight away, so we didn't need all those staff, but it very quickly the business was starting to bounce back a lot faster than what we anticipated. And we also thought, when we came out of the last lockdown, we thought there's going to be all these people looking for work. We can cherry pick the best of the best out there. So we thought, let's place these ads, let's start recruiting. And we spent a fortune on Your Seek, on Jora, on Gumtree, on every avenue. There was no applications. There was simply nobody applying for work. And it really had us worried, because we thought, what's going on? Where are all these people looking for work? So we were very tight. Our staff were working longer hours, they were overworked, and they were enjoying it because they were being paid for it. But where our concern was, how long can our staff sustain this? How long can we keep on driving our staff to work harder and longer hours than they've ever done? There was a group of staff that thought they were doing us a favor, that they were coming back to work and their attitudes changed, and they thought, I only want to work Monday to Friday. I don't want to work nights. I don't want to work weekends. And we used to say, well, hold on, this is the hospitality industry. You've got to work the nights and the weekends. So we found that the attitude changed slightly. There was, the pool of people that were willing to work hard, and they were the hardest workers, and they're still with us today. But it was really slow in trying to recruit. And only till the recent months was where we really came back to the numbers that we needed for our staffing. So when we come out of this lockdown, again, it's going to be an interesting time for us. So it's about making sure that we can capture those people looking for work, and they choose Catering HQ over any other businesses out there.
Yeah, fantastic, Steve. So one of the ways that you could have solved some of those problems was to go to Jenny White and get a few staff from White now. So what did it look like from your side, Jenny? What did that previous, when we started to open up, how did the labour market look to you? Was it different? Was the attitude different? How did it feel?
Exactly. Thanks, John. Exactly what Steve said. Just devastating on so many levels. As you mentioned before, I pretty much concentrate in the club industry, New South Wales, ACT, Victoria and Queensland, but the majority are in New South Wales. We already had a chef shortage. We knew that. But as soon as COVID hit the first time and we came out of it, it was like nobody wanted to work in the industry anymore. And I sort of get it, because if you look at COVID hits clubs, restaurants, gyms and nail salons. That's sort of it, and my guess is people don't want to work in those environments, have to have a mask on, mandated mask, serving customers, all of these sort of things. We don't know, because I can't actually do a survey on people that aren't joining our industry. And I'd love to do that. I'd love to say, why aren't you joining the hospitality industry? I mean, that sort of survey, how do you do it? You don't know who your market is, so it's hard to speak to them. But what we noticed is that it was not just the chef level anymore. It was definitely the staff level. The staff, you might get quite a few applications. So I would put an ad out for a bar attendant at a club, and I might get 200 applications, of which 0 turned up for interview and maybe 3 answered a phone call. Like, there was one particular club that did get 200 and something applications for, I think it was a bar attendant job, and they put 3 staff on to call of all of those applicants, and they didn't get one out of it. And that's just the nature of what was happening. But where it actually grew disastrously was in the supervisory duty management level. That is something that is virtually impossible. So how then, when we couldn't find supervisors and duty managers coming up from sort of that line staff level, and then you looked out and no one else was around, it became a competitive salary market. So we were going from duty managers being paid $60,000 a year to, there are some clubs paying $100,000 for a duty manager. And they're the clubs that are now going to retain their duty management team. There are many, many clubs that are very low staffed on duty management. So it is just disastrous. And I felt the same. You know how everyone says everyone's moving regionally? So I have many, many regional clients looking for any sort of management, any sort of staff. And I found that, yes, apparently people are moving to the regional areas for the better life and get away from the COVID thing, but they're certainly not moving into the club industry. So out there is different. So even if I'm doing a CEO job, say, at a medium-sized 8,000 member club, which might pay 140,000, pre-COVID, I might have got 80 applicants. Now I might get 10. So that's the sort of challenges that we're facing, John.
And do you think, Jenny, that was because it's that supervisory duty management layer that are so attractive to those other industries that were still booming? Is that why we lost them, do you think?
Yeah, 100%, John. I believe that. They only have to work generally, 9 to 5 in Bunnings, as Steve mentioned before. Many left for sort of administration type jobs, where they're not dealing with customers that are complaining about why they have to wear a mask, why they have to sit away from their mates, or the 4 square metre rule, the 2 square metre rule, all of that sort of stuff. It was a new landscape for supervisors and duty managers. Instead of just walking around and being friendly and making sure the customer experience was outstanding, they were dealing with angry customers, mental health challenges, all of this sort of stuff. So that is my thoughts anyway. Yeah.
So Steve, what do you think it's going to be like coming out of this shutdown? I mean, if we had those stresses last time, I'm guessing that we're going to have the same sort of thing. Have you changed the way you're going to operate on the way out to deal with some of those shortages and to not perpetuate the shortages? How are you going to deal with what's going to still be a very tight labour market?
Look, we're hoping, I'll use the word hoping, that the 320 staff we employ will still be there when we come out. Now, we know there's going to be a percentage that won't be. What we have developed for our current staff is ongoing training. So we're engaging. So while they're sitting at home, we've created e-learning platforms, doing courses for them, to recapture our induction, engage with those staff while they're sitting at home to continue with their staff training. We're working close with the CBA Bank to offer opportunities for our staff. If they're an employee of Catering HQ, they've got the benefits to bank with CBA and get some advice, financial advice through CBA. While we're working on equity plans for our staff as well, to be, to have some shares within the Catering HQ group as we continue to grow. So we're building all these incentives for our current staff, and hopefully we'll retain some of those existing 320 staff when we do come out of it. And we are communicating that to our existing staff. As far as new candidates, we're recruiting, and we are also, engaging and promoting Catering HQ as an employer of choice. It is an unknown. It is a very unknown, and nobody has shed any light that they won't come across to us as we, reopen. But it is a very unknown area. But as a company, we're keeping things rolling. We're keeping things moving. So when we do come out of lockdown, that we do bounce back. There's been discussions about going back to limited menus, so we don't have to have as many chefs in the kitchen, and reducing staff numbers, changing our service model. We don't want to do that. We want to come back, reopen the way we close. So our venues also become a venue of choice.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. So I guess some of those strategies are going to work for the types of roles that we can skill up fairly quickly. As you said, changing menus so that you lessening the impact in the kitchen. What can we do to skill up those that are in those supervisory and management roles and in kitchen roles quickly enough to deal with this shortage as it rolls on? I'll go to you first, Steve, and then Jenny on that question.
Look, we're working on different strategies through our training models and how we can train those staff, whether it's off-site or on-the-job training, mentoring them through our senior management team. So across our group, we've got 38 senior managers. So we're ensuring that they're mentoring those junior staff to upskill them. And what we've found is people like that opportunity to be able to progress. Those junior roles sure, they're not ready to become supervisors, but as Jenny alluded to earlier, you know, we can't find those managers that we need to run our venues. So we do need to upskill. So I think by, you know, focusing on training, on the job training, you know, outside training, and having good mentors to upskill them, I think that's our focus point, to upskill them.
Yeah.
Jenny, I'm not sure your thoughts.
Yeah, Jenny?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think before we upskill, we've got to actually give them a reason to stay in the industry. This is the hardest part. What I'm scared about in this Greater Sydney lockdown is that we'll open up and many of the staff we currently have in supervisory, chef roles, line staff won't come back. Either they won't come back because there isn't enough work when we reopen, or they just go, enough is enough. I'm sick of being stood down. I'm sick of all this sort of stuff. I don't want to go back to the mask thing, whatever the reasons are. So enticing people to stay is, you know, to me, number one, first and foremost, before any sort of training happens. We actually, in the club industry, we just launched a program in the last 2 days called Clubs for Clubs. I was talking to managers over the past few days who, at their particular club, they could not afford to pay their staff at all anything when they were stood down, zero. And so what do you do you know, if you're a small club and you've got 10 staff that you've stood down and can't give a cent to? Like, why would they want to come back, really? So we actually started a program within the club industry where clubs that can afford to donate some funds, donated to a pool of funds, that those funds are going to the clubs that couldn't afford to pay their staff anywhere, not for wages, but just for gifts. So they're going to actually be buying gift cards, Woolies cards, Coles card, and giving them to the staff that they couldn't pay, just to show some love. Because if you don't show love in the form of a salary, because you can't, how else can you show them love? So I think the showing love before the training is really important. But as Steve said, obviously you've got to train as well. So that's my thoughts.
No, absolutely. And there's been so many good initiatives where we've seen, you know, that sort of support for staff. We've had all those places that have been offering meals and meal kits and all sorts of things to try and support the staff in the industry. And of course, we have to acknowledge the support packages that have now been put up. And, you know, it took only a couple of days to get there. And we've now got some support at least flowing through to businesses and to also staff that are displaced. But the point remains, as you've said, we've got to be able to hold on to these people. Otherwise, it's going to be even more of a world of pain by the time we get to the other side. I've just been monitoring the chat questions, of which there's quite a few coming in. The first lot of questions went to wage pressure, which obviously we're seeing. And Jenny, you mentioned it there with a couple of roles. How widespread do you expect that's going to be? And, you know, can these businesses actually afford to pay the additional money that is being forced upon businesses in this market?
Yep, I'll respond to that, and then I wouldn't mind Steve having a chat, because he's really close to that himself, and you know what his GP margins are to be able to afford to increase salaries. But 100% wages are already going up. You know, those that are out of the award wages, to entice people to stay. I did a bit of a survey with a few hundred chefs actually in a group not that long ago, and I put to the group, you know, whether it was about money, what would entice them to go to another job as a chef. Excuse me for looking to the side. I've just got to look at the results. The number one that had the majority of votes was working a 4-day week, doing their 38 to 40 hours within a 4-day week. That was the outstanding, like, you know, there was 154 votes out of the 200 that was their number one. The next thing was above award wages. That was the second thing that would entice them. All that stuff that we thought about, you know, no split shifts, all that wasn't even nights. That was not relevant. So the things we used to think were important, like not working nights, no splits, you know, quality food, all of that stuff didn't seem to be relevant. It was all about 4-day week and above board wages. So that sadly seems to be the way that we need to entice people across. Steve.
It's interesting you say that. Just before we went into lockdown, we changed our chefs to 4-day weeks, just as we were going into lockdown. So that was our new policy, reducing 4 days on, 3 days off, and it was very well received. So it's like, I'm glad we did the right thing there, Jenny, and it's interesting that you had that as a survey. But I agree. I mean, wages are being pushed up. Our supervisors, restaurant managers, and in our business, we're just catering. So they don't have to be there till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when a club closes, or having to deal with people, intoxicated people. Ours is, we're purely food. But even if that's their responsibility, their expectation of their salary is much higher than what we used to pay. But it is interesting to say that we have gone to those 4-day weeks. The pressure's on, hence why we're trying to offer them the training, offer them advantages by being an employee of Catering HQ, offer them employment shadow equity plans or equity plans to be part of the business, so they're part of the bigger picture as well. So we're trying to incentivize our staff in other ways to try to retain them, and then they obviously get their remuneration back.
Thanks.
And so can I just add one quick thought before I go back to Jenny? Steve, there's been a lot of discussion about the impact this is going to have on prices, and some comments on the chat to that effect as well. Do you see prices going up as wage pressure goes on? How do you see that playing out?
People are so much more dollar conscious as well, though. It gets to a point where we have to absorb it. So, our supply chain is going up in price, the wages are going up, and we're in a position we feel where we can't put our prices up because there's too much pressure. People are coming out, they've been stood down, they don't have the money they used to, although people are not traveling. So at one point we thought, hey, people are coming to our venues because they're no longer going overseas trips, so they're more cashed up. But with this current lockdown, people are going to be tighter with their dollar spend. We'll have to absorb it as a business until such a point where we feel that we can lift those pricings. So there's a lot of pressure for all of us.
Well, it's always very competitive, isn't it? So, Jenny, sorry, I cut across you earlier.
That's all right. No, I cut across you, John. I'll back on to Steve's comment then about not having to cut prices. Some of the bigger groups of caterers, restaurant chains, etc., that can't get chefs, that just can't pay those salaries for chefs, are definitely moving towards the production kitchen side of things, as you well know, Steve, and most people on this Zoom would also know, because of the efficiencies. That's it, efficiencies and inability to get the people that need to do the job, so that when you're rolling out the food in your outlets, that they don't have to be trained to anything more than food handling, really. So that seems to be a trend that I think restaurants might have to head towards. That's one thought. I don't know if, John, did you want to say something against that?
Yeah, no, interesting. I mean, and I recall, I think in must have been around about 1997, I wrote a paper called Culinary Armageddon that foreshadowed this move to production kitchens and what that would mean to de-skilling our workforce in our kitchens. And I think that now is starting to come home. It's kind of we're seeing a very different skills base emerging on the back of that. And there are obviously very large restaurant groups that are doing exactly that. And what that basically does is interrupts the flow of apprentices coming through the system. You're getting less qualified people working in kitchens, and therefore not as able to bring people through the apprenticeship system into kitchens. You've basically got the production kitchen model operating with people in the production mode and then someone finishing it off on site. It's a totally different job and a totally different skill system. So what do we need to do to the skilling system then to cope with that, though? How do we deal with an environment where we have these uber specialists and on the other side those that are working in those sort of production environments, bearing in mind that I just also refer to dark kitchens that are operating in essentially the same sort of way, production staff that are there with maybe one person that's oversighting the operation of the kitchen. Any thoughts on how the training system needs to evolve to deal with that?
Benny?
Who wants to answer that question? Yeah.
I have not got an answer for you, John. You know, I see this is where, you know, the food side is certainly heading into the production kitchen side, and that's when a lot of the investment is going. But, you know, you know, to me, that means less training for line staff, less training for the actual site-by-site staff. But I don't have answers to the future, sadly.
Yeah, John, interesting enough, we have recently set up our own production kitchen as well, and that's purely, you know, for consistency, for quality. We've done that also to reduce the labour hours within the kitchen, so we can go to those 4-day weeks for our chefs. But I've always used an example where there's two particular staff of mine that started right at the bottom of the ranks. So one of my venue managers at one of my venues, he started as a trolley boy, pushing the trolley around, clearing the dirty plates, stacking them on, and he's now one of my venue managers at one of my clubs. On the flip side, I've got a head chef. He started right on the bottom of the ranks as a kitchen hand. We trained him, we put him through commercial cookery. He's now a head chef at one of our sites. So, you know, it's about seeing the quality in our junior staff and our line staff and focusing on them and really investing in them. And that's internally and externally. People that come in, you know, any of the lower candidates, bring them in, but really focusing on training and upskilling those staff and investing in them to really upskill them.
I just have one more comment here. If you don't mind, John, I'm taking over your job here. Done that before.
Go for it.
There's a comment from Ben Williamson, and he's the executive manager of people and culture at Club Menai, and he's just made a comment on the training side of things. He said, Club Central, which has two clubs, Club Central Hurstville and Club Central Menai. He says, we offer fully accredited training to Cert 4 at no cost to the employee. They don't have to go to TAFE. It's purely recognition of the work they complete on the job. And we've seen little or no applicants joining on that upskilling opportunity. So is training actually, you know, something that will entice people? Maybe not. Maybe the world has changed. That's not a thing. Don't know.
Yeah, I think it's all kind of part of the same scenario that Steve painted so well earlier. And, you know, the more you get shortages, the more you get pressure in workplaces, the more that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the work becomes harder, people become more dissatisfied, and they don't have any time for training because they're kind of working so hard to make up for the fact that the venue is short-staffed. And, you know, it's all this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that just seems to keep getting worse and worse. The question is how we break the cycle and, you know, how we manage to set up a system that allows us to get out of that. Personally, I believe we're probably not going to do that until we can bring some overseas workers back into the system to relieve the pressure. But yeah, that's probably a topic for another day. So where are we drawing people from, or probably during the sort of recovery period, where were we drawing people from that we hadn't in the past? And to what extent are those sort of markets live for us to continue to look at once we get past this lockdown that we're currently in? Jenny, do you want to start on that one?
Yep. Well, it's an interesting answer. Where were we drawing people from? I think it was more, how can we change our businesses to not have to have those people because we couldn't find them anywhere. I did a few weeks ago another little survey within a club managers group about whether they would be interested in employing over 50s. And I think it was about 95% of club managers said, yes, we want to look at now 50 to 70-year-olds basically in a range of roles. And remember, in hospitality outlets, we've got administration roles, reception, marketing, digital stuff, as well as, food and beverage and gaming. And so, I'll do a plug because I'm allowed to do a plug here and you can't stop me. But we're about to launch maturenow.com.au, which will just host resumes of 50s and over as a pool of candidates. But we're a few weeks away from that yet, but that's the only pool that I could actually think of that we were really missing and that we could target. But it really does come back to, I think we almost need to take another step back, where some funds needs to go into how great it is to work in an industry. Yeah. Like, how are we going to entice them back to this industry in the first place? Like, how do we sell that?
And that's certainly something that we've put up as one of the very urgent things that we need to do, and we've got a number of applications live with government at the moment to get a whole of industry approach to this sort of rebranding the industry opportunity and producing a resource that we're able to move people around. But really, very interesting point there, Jenny, about mature-aged people. I think you're absolutely spot on. If you look at the sources in the labour market that we've traditionally drawn on, one that we're absolutely underweight in is mature-aged people working in our industry. It's always been the case. Other countries seem to have dealt with it. We haven't got there. Maybe they've just been more desperate than we've been. Steve, what do you think about that solution?
Oh, look, I totally agree with it. There is no age bracket. We want people that want to come and work for the industry and be part of the family. That's why we call it. That's our approach. Our industry is like a big happy family, and we want to continue that. So age is not a factor for us. We offer, for everybody to come and join the team and to be part of, as I said, part of that family. And I think it's important that we focus on that. We don't alienate anybody.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, good comments as always. So maybe just to go to a few more comments on the chat there. Quite a few solutions coming up in terms of things that we can do within the training regime to be bringing people in more quickly. Some observations there that we need to first get it through the course design type systems, whether that be through ASQA or some of our other systems that we rely on to be able to get accredited training out to staff and get people moving into skilled occupations more quickly. No doubt that needs to happen. And again, one of those areas that we're working on at Tourism Training, which leads me to the sort of observation about this skills wallet that we've also put up for urgent support from the government. It seems to us that there's a lot of training that's going on that's not accredited training, not part of the formal training system, and also not part of any recognition. So if you look at, for instance, the COVID safe training that's going on around the country, none of that gets recognised from state to state. No, it doesn't get recognised from company to company, let alone state to state. And then you've got all of those other skills. So the question that comes from that for me is, to what extent are we getting people doing this sort of informal training? Steve, I'm guessing some of the training that you've got going on is not accredited. Why are we having to do that when we've got a formal training system? And how do we get that training recognised when people do inevitably move from company to company or, heaven forbid, state to state?
Yeah, look, we do both parts, John. We do the non-accredited training, which is more focusing on the catering HQ policies and what our expectations are, and through customer service and food standards. But we're doing work with a lot of RTOs and do a lot of traineeships with those RTOs and do on-the-job training, which is all accredited. So we do focus on both, and I think it's important that you have a balance of both to keep your own company policies up to date, but then any accredited training needs to be done through an RTO and on the job. So we do focus on both, and I think it's important that every business does do that.
So Jenny, you are looking at, I don't know how many thousands of resumes every day, and looking deeply into the skills that people have got. Are you seeing an increase in learning that's happening informally through these informal sort of skills programs, skill sets, micro credentials, whatever we want to call them. Is there more of that going on that's evident in what people are presenting to you as their skills base?
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, there's a bit of a gap between the higher level education and I guess I forgot what you call that, sort of line staff type of skills education. Certainly employers and boards of directors in my industry, the club industry, are looking for higher level education degrees that are general business, so not skills based, general business degrees. That's a real plus at higher levels. At lower levels, it doesn't seem to be important. So there's actually a gap in the learning, to get to diploma level and above, because the lower level education isn't deemed to be important. So then if they're to move in their career to be a executive manager, they haven't done the basics in the first place. So it's a bit of a gap there. But I can certainly see a need for coaching managers of clubs into understanding why recognised training is a good thing. Because at the moment, I don't think, like if I went and asked people why is recognised training better than, just basic skills training, or someone else someone in the team training them, there is no answer to that, I'm sure. Like there would be few people that would say, well, the career path and, moving into different levels of education and across businesses, as you said.
And I'm guessing a lot of the reason for that is that the benefit there is really in the hands of the staff member that's being trained, rather than in the hands of the business. It's the benefit rests with them to be able to move and get promoted and so on. So that's always been one of our real challenges in that recognition space. I just invite any other questions anyone wants to put on the chat. If you've got a burning question there, please add it into the chat. While I get a sort of final wrap up, I'm going to just try and draw, before I get to the final question, I'm just going to try and draw those two thoughts together. If we are really going to try and focus on getting mature age people into the industry, and I have to say from a tourism training perspective, I can't imagine how many times Mr. Galvin kept saying we need to get mature age people into the industry. It was one of his great mantras. But if that's the case, and we also need these absolutely vital skills that are either mandated or we know we need, even down to your RSAs and your safe food handling and your COVID safe skills, how are the older generations that we need to bring into the industry, how are they going to cope with gaining those skills? How are we going to get them those skills quickly enough to be able to use that part of the labour market that we haven't been able to use in the past? So, Steve, to you first, and then Jenny, and then we'll go to...
I'm going to hand it over to Jenny first, actually.
Okay, away you go, Jenny.
I can see her jumping.
Yeah. This may or may, I don't sugarcoat things generally, so I won't do it on this one. I think it's getting them unskilled to start with in the business, and changing the way our hospitality businesses look at employment. So instead of taking on someone permanent, part-time or full-time or whatever, job share between, a mature 60-year-old may only want to work 4 hours a day, twice a week. So how can we actually take them on board, and just say, okay, you can, we've got 6 employees that can, 6 mature age people can all share one full-time role, and, work between them. They can roster between them, even, like, just change the way we do things to look at these mature age people, and don't say to them, you must have RSA, you must have RCG, you must have worked in this area or that area. Come with nothing, and then give them the tools they need to be legal in your venue, but get them in first by offering, ask them what they need. What would you like? 1 shift a week on a Saturday morning for 4 hours? Done. We'll make it happen for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, good thoughts. Steve?
Yeah, look, I think there has to be that flexibility and not alienate them, because, it's how we script the ads and how we advertise you've got to have this skill, you've got to have this certification. And as Jenny said, I think we've got to, you know, they're coming in and it might be a new, you know, a new industry for them. And, you know, and I often interview a lot of these mature, you know, staff, and we say, we'll train you. You come to us, we'll spend that time, we invest in our staff. And I think we've got to make sure that they don't feel alienated, that it's an industry not for them. So as Jenny alluded to, I think we've got to, you know, even if they don't have those skill sets or they don't have those certification, they're still welcome. So I think we need to, you know, really sell it to them.
Yeah, good thought. So a lot of questions or comments actually on the chat, which are talking about skill sets and the need to, as Jenny said, bring people on first, then allow them access to gaining those skills that they need. But as we've discussed, let's get them then on a journey to gathering more skills and growing within the industry. Even if they only want to work a couple of shifts or one shift, let's at least get them in the journey. Welcome them into the hospitality family and get them on their way. Also, quite a few comments just responding to the mature age solution and fundamentally agreeing with that. And just to gathering those skill sets, and that's absolutely why we're promoting this concept of the skills wallet, to try and make sure that, you know, using the app that we're now using each and every day in our wallet for Service New South Wales or all those other apps, you can use that to make sure that we're giving people proof that they've gained skills that are valuable to all of us. Some chats there about working holiday makers and getting overseas students back in, and why aren't we lobbying for that? Well, I can tell you we're doing a lot of advocacy in that space. We've got agreement to work on a range of pilots and are currently working on a range of pilots. And you would have noticed in the National Cabinet announcement only a week ago that in this phase of our recovery process, it is the pilot phase. And that's because we've advocated very hard for pilots to bring back in the workers we so desperately need, including working holiday makers and overseas students. And that is happening. Probably got a bit of a hiatus here in New South Wales, or in Sydney at least. But as soon as we get past this lockdown, we'll be back on that track. I might use that for a shameless promotion of the Skills Summit coming up in September. Information on our website. One of the speakers is from the part of the New South Wales government that is working on the strategy to bring overseas students back. It'll be an incredible session looking at how that strategy is going to play out. So come along to the summit and get informed on where that government strategy is up to. Can I just now go to a final sort of question, which is really about what happens now? Your best guess, both of you, what's going to happen when we get to, let's say October. We're past this sort of hiccup. We're getting to a point where we've got a whole stack of Australians vaccinated and starting to look at the way out. We've got some numbers coming into the country for overseas students and working holiday makers, but nowhere near enough. What do you do by the time we get to October to survive and start to rebuild our workforce? Steve, to you first.
Oh, look, we're ramping things up right now, John, and we're working on what that looks like, because we know what we experienced last year, and coming into Christmas, you know, Christmas time last year before the Northern Beaches cluster, you know, business was absolutely booming. So, you know, we're very confident that it's going to happen again this year. So we are doing everything we can through recruitment, through, as I said, through training, through staff incentives, to incentivize current staff and new staff to really build that labour force. So when we do come out of this lockdown into those warmer months, that we're ready for it. So we're doing everything we can, and we'll be, you know, using social platforms and advertising to really get, you know, Catering HQ out there as that employer of choice to really build that labour force. So, you know, we're strategizing in every way we can to really make it attractive for people to come and work for Catering HQ, and that's by upskilling them, offering them those job incentives, training, you know, everything we discussed today about is definitely something that we're focusing on.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and I'm sure you'll be successful. Your commitment to to getting to that point of being an employer of choice is just to be admired. And I'm sure the way you treat people, you'll get there, mate. So thank you very much for those insights. Jenny, so what does it look like in October for you? Mature now, what is it? Mature now?
Maturenow.com.au.
Yeah.
Maturenow.com.au.
Yeah. So yes, shameless promotion. What does it look like when we've tapped into the mature age market? We've got them all skilled up. They've all got RSAs, working a couple of shifts a week. We're in the land of milk and honey.
Yep.
What do you think it looks like?
Did I say maturenow.com.au?
Yeah.
Firstly, I just want to throw a shout out of respect to Steve and his business. No one grows a business to the extreme that he does without being a great employer. So, through this COVID time, it's people like you, Steve, that you just, I feel for you, but I take my hat off to you as well. So John's question was what will it look like? I could speak to what I'd like to see. Whether or not that will happen is a different thing. I would like to see marketing change. I would like to see us walking away from we're a COVID safe venue. We're COVID safe this, COVID safe that, all that COVID thing. Get rid of the word COVID. Stop bringing it front of mind. Chuck it in the back and say, we're an organisation. We add value to your life. We make you feel good. Just stop talking about COVID. The more advertising we do about COVID, the more people go, ooh, that's right. Clubs, restaurants, nail salons and gyms all have COVID. So I'd like to see the marketing change to be about how a business makes a potential customer feel, much rather that. I'd like to see the way we employ people change. As I said, maturenow.com.au. But looking at way we can adjust shifts and fit into what people want, what days they want, what hours they want, not the venue dictating what they want. I'd like to see the offerings be different. I'd like to see the efficiencies be different, as we talked about with the production kitchen, angle. I'd like to see efficiencies are super important. And I'd like to see the venues that have been running for many years be open to adaptation and change and really think the world has changed. What do people that want to come to our venue want? That's it. Not what do we want to give to the people? What do the people want when they come in, and we will give them that. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Jenny. That was a great sum up. And I think you're absolutely right to look at the way we'd like to see it, and let's all work towards getting there. A couple of closing comments from me. The first thing is when we get to our skills summit in September, we are looking at a range of these solutions. You'll notice that we haven't called it recovery or restart. I think just like we're getting over some of the language there around the pandemic, I think we're also over recovery and restart and all of those sort of rebirthing type options. We've called it achieving our aspirations or reaching our potential, looking at the future and what we can really do out of this. The other part of looking at our potential is linked to the work that we're doing at the moment around what is the future of tourism, and we're going through a piece of work around reimagining the visitor economy. Part of that is looking at how we can change up the way we operate our industries. How do we get that productivity? How do we get the uplift by engaging technology and innovation that adds to the visitor experience? We've got at the summit a speaker on the new Me and You system, which has been around for a while now, but ordering at your table and all of those sort of technologies like that Me and You brings to the table will really change up some of those staffing formula to allow us to get food on tables, get hospitality to people in a much more efficient way. So my panel, Steve and Jenny, thank you so much. Great input, great people to have on our session today. To our audience, thank you so much. I think in the end, we reached about 25 odd people and we're grateful for your attendance. We've also recorded the session and we'll have it available on a podcast on the Tourism Training Australia website. Please visit, please relook at the session, tell your friends, and join up as a member of TTA. Thank you all, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Gary. You're on mute, so I can't hear you. You're saying maturenow.com.au, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
I've written it down as well as photographed it. It'll be used. I just need the hip replacement.